Welcome, everybody. Really thank you for joining us today, and we really appreciate that you're staying with us for the afternoon. And this session today is digital transformation. It's all about the data and the user experience. So the focus of the session, as you can imagine, is about the data. So what I'd just like to mention a couple of things that we're going to cover during the session, and that is the power of operational data and analytics. So it's really about operational data. We're talking a lot about data platforms and also analytics and analytic tools. And ultimately, at the end of the day, and this is just meant to be very high level, setting the stage for the session, because I want to go through it really rapidly because I want you to get to the user cases, because I think these people are terrific speakers. So anyway, big data by itself, and we keep having more data, as you know, it's virtually useless unless something is done with it, whether it's a technology or whatever, but you have to make some kind of sense out of it and get insight that delivers value to the organization. So at the end of the day, it's really about getting real-time, actionable decisions. So just a little bit, we might mention a little bit about the IT-OT convergence, but more around not as much of the technology as around the user experience. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And so we're also going to talk about the data challenges and opportunities. And there's a lot of data challenges and opportunities. And what we hear about data, we hear a lot of things. We hear, is the data connectable? Is it, and that's a big thing. Connectivity has not been easy, as you know. It's been years trying to get all the data connected, and we still hear about silos of data. So today we still see spreadsheets out there. Is it actionable? Is it consistent? Is it quality data? And security data. So there's a lot of different things going on. And the other thing that we're hearing about as a trend is the auto updates. You know, going to an autonomous environment, like auto recognize, auto governance, and so on. And we're also hearing a little bit about using AI algorithms and ML algorithms, and they're getting better, these algorithms. So that's just some of the data challenges, but there are also opportunities. And a lot of people, what they do is they look for the problems and solve these problems using the data. So the other thing, the area that we heard about, trend, is about collaboration and collaborative teams. It's really about the user experience and the alignment of the user, the people, the data, and the technologies, because they need not just to be connected, but they need to be interconnected and interoperable. They also need to have an aligned thinking of collaborative minds. And so, and it has to be distributed across the globe today. So we need to see more enterprise collaboration. So, and the other thing, that trend that I see, is people keep talking about user experience. How can I use this technology easily? Can I look at it at a glance? Is it easy to use? Is it simple to use? And what I say is user experience plus the easy use equals how it'll get used. If it's easy to use, people don't have to get out a manual and start relearning the technology every time they use it, or they don't have to start saying, how do I do this, or how do I do that? They will use it. And some of that's cultural too. There's some culture involved in this, and that's, we could get into a lot of details, but we're not going to get into that today. So we're also seeing as a trend multi-cloud and also what they call enterprise historians. Some people call them data platforms. We're also seeing newer types of platforms with seamless integration that are interoperable. We're hearing about low code, no code. The Microsoft guy said that he didn't see a lot in the survey, but I've heard, I do the data historian space, and I also do the MES space, and I was hearing over and over again about these newer low-code, no-code platforms. And they're scalable and security. And so those are just some of the things that I was hearing along with the enterprise historian. So thought I should show you a little bit of data. We do a lot of research at ARC, and you know, some people don't know what kind of research we do, but I do the data platforms, and this is from my data platform study. And so we look at, we forecast with algorithms and analytics, and we look at where the market is, and we collect revenue. So we do it by revenue, so it's pretty good numbers. And you can see that by the market here, you can see that the electric power gen, the chemical, and the oil and gas industry are the largest industries, just by the size of the bubble. So in the next 5 years, you're going to see those are the industries for opportunities for the suppliers for data platforms. Those are the industries that are the largest. And there are some other industries as well. And the fastest growing is over on the right-hand side here. You can see that the fastest growing is refining and oil and gas. So we also look at the types of industrial data platforms, the types of data that's being stored on them. And of course, the bulk of the data is the structured process data, which is tag type data. But we're also seeing other types of data being integrated into the data platforms, like multi-dimensional data as well as unstructured data. So that gives you an idea of what we're seeing. And we're also seeing the data, the growth of the data, the largest data. This is the wrong presentation, but we're seeing don't pay attention to the words on the right because it's for the next slide. So, but anyway, we're seeing the largest data is, you can see on the right, it's the unstructured it's unstructured data, which would be your videos, photography. Those are the type of things that we're seeing growing the fastest. And the largest, of course, is the on-premise structured, not on-premise, but the structured process data. But we also look at the cloud and the deployment models, and what we're seeing is the fastest growing, of course, is the cloud. Of course, the largest area for on-premise today is on-premise for historians. So essentially, there's a lot of benefits in the data, and that's really why I think most people are here, because there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of benefits. And what I tell people is you need to invest in data because it's really the data that's going to get you into the digital transformation. And that's really what it's all about. It's the data management and the analytics. And so it's really all about the data and the user experience. And so that's kind of my message to set the stage for our presentations today. And so what I'd like to do, and that's all I was going to say today. I wanted to be quick because I thought that it would be better to get our speakers up here. So with that, I'd like to call our first speaker up, who is Chris Glenn, who is with Phillips 66. And their bios are all on the app, so you can check them out if you want to.
As I was putting this presentation together, I was thinking about the journey that we as Phillips 66 went on. And I was reminded it truly is a journey. And it's not just what we did, it's why we did it. And so I wanted to take you guys along that journey and focus on the why a lot. And then we'll get in, obviously, into the what and that we'll talk about. And so this really indicates and kind of encapsulates the two problem statements that we all have. One is, at the end of the day, we need data, right? It was brought up earlier in the previous presentation. And regardless of industry, there's various issues and challenges that we all face that keep our equipment from running at its optimal performance all the time. And you need data to help solve that, help keep you out of LPOs or lost profit opportunities, et cetera. And so like many in this room, we want to reduce the number of lost profit opportunities. We've got to keep our stuff running. And so as problem solvers, we need data. Okay, yeah, Chris, cool, that's simple. So what's the big issue? So our problem and others within our industry, and many of you all in other industries, our data's in silos. It's not easily accessible. It's accessible for the people with boots on the ground to solve the problems locally at the site, but if we tried to take a step back, and I'll try not to literally take a step back, it's helping to solve it at a much larger or macro level. And so if you can solve some of those problems at the macro level, then you're solving the big rocks, and then magically money falls out of trees generally. So let's start our journey. So if we're going to break down the data in silos, we'd have to address the various challenges that have made this difficult for us and anybody else to start with. And so, in our sake, our operational data is at 12 to 15 different sites, various refineries, refining, midstream locations, different plants all across the world, behind firewalls. Okay, so that's challenge one. If we did move the data, how would users even search or interact with the data? You've got to have context. You can't just have the data itself. And obviously, anybody that has operational technology data, they're always concerned about the cybersecurity components. How do you keep that data secure? How do you ensure that the right people have access to this and not the bad guys that want to do bad things to your data? And then even if somehow we did address all of those first three concerns, how can the cloud handle our scale with as much data that we all generate from an OT perspective? And just to give you a sense, from a Phillips 66 perspective, we're talking 16,000 bits of information every second. So that's 500 billion events a year. That's a lot of data. And then, not to mention, even getting to that point, it will take years to move our data. This is at least where we started. Insert transformation, right? And so with our transformation, we had a lot of conversations with our business, refining, midstream, et cetera, around driving value enablement projects or initiatives. And so we knew that if we were going to get any money, we had to focus, like I said, on those big rocks and adopt an enterprise-first mindset. And so instead of trying to focus locally at the respective sites for their various issues, we decided to sit people in a room, have the conversations, and understand what their various use cases were. And magically, this site's issue is very similar to this site's issue, which is similar to this site's issue. And if you can bottle those up and box them up into big rocks, again, the money starts to fall out of trees. And so it was no longer an issue of should we do this, it's how fast can you do this? The demand was there. And so we knew that based upon the different use cases and personas, and I'm really focused on personas as well because it's not always fit for purpose. I said in a presentation earlier where a gentleman was talking about, hey, I'm an executive and I don't care about all that data. I just want to know when the check engine light is on. That resonated, right? Because we're very similar. So based on your various personas, you have to have fit-for-purpose dashboards. Data for the sake of data is sometimes dangerous, and so you have to make sure that you're doing things for specific reasons. So anyway, based on our different use cases, we need to be able to solve real-time issues and interpolated. So machine learning and modeling, et cetera, troubleshooting versus historical trending analysis, that kind of stuff. We knew that we wanted to have co-located data sources. So having all of your data, your OT and your business system information, ERPs, et cetera, all in a singular location certainly makes it a lot easier for self-service reporting, for advanced analytics, et cetera. And you can start to solve more complex challenges like mechanical integrity, et cetera. And so we knew that the data had to be easily accessible, both internally and externally. Internally, again, I mentioned the self-service use cases. But externally, we integrate with a lot of different partners, upstream and downstream of us. And like many of you, we're on our sustainability journey as well. And we have to interact with government agencies for regulatory compliance. And so we needed the data to be not only accessible for internal use, but readily available for permits as we're trying to create a new refinery on the West Coast, or we're trying to do something else. We want to be able to attain that data more easily from an accessibility perspective. And just like any transformation, you're always going to focus on automation, right? Because there's efficiencies. And in our case, we wanted the data and the ingestion pipelines to be as automated as possible so that the people that are truly problem solving are not data wranglers. They're actually solving a problem. They're looking at the analytics. They're looking at the data to make decisions. So now that I've kind of talked about why and some of the requirements that we had, let's get into the what and what we actually did. Simply put, we called uptake. Uptake Fusion, with Uptake Fusion, we have a secure, scalable OT data pipeline that easily moves our data to Azure Data Explorer. Okay? It fits our strategy and architecture at Phillips 66. So from a data hub perspective, we're already on Azure. All of our business system data is starting to move to Azure, and a lot of it was already there from a refining perspective. And so selling that to EA was not a big deal. It was much easier. By bringing your operational technology data, I'm just going to keep calling it OT data now. By bringing all of your OT data and the context into Azure Data Explorer, you now have the ability to solve much more complex challenges. You can migrate data into various warehouses, co-locating with other data sources, building your digital twins, if you will. Insights layers for sharing dashboards, again, fit-for-purpose dashboards for various decision-making. For reports, internal, external, whatever it may be. And then, for me, the most important piece is it's searchable, right? So because you're leveraging the power of Azure Data Explorer, Synapse, et cetera, you have data catalogs that you can then integrate with. So folks can say, I just want to understand X amount of data, boom, here's everything, right? So this allows us to not only meet the challenges and the use cases that we have today, but also allows us to be thinking for the next generation. And with Uptake Fusion, we were able to shorten that runway. Had we tried to do this ourselves, we're looking at 18 months plus, right? Just with the data movement part. Forget the context, just the data movement. And so if we kind of start looking to the right now, this is just a high-level architectural diagram. And what you'll see is you're coming from, at least from a Philips perspective, you're coming from our enterprise Pi system, which is replicated from all the Pi systems that we have at all of our sites. So we have a Pi-to-Pi connection. So we were able to solve a lot of our challenges by having an enterprise Pi. From there, we're moving into 3 different resource groups. There's a refining resource group, a midstream resource group, and then kind of our secret sauce resource group, which is our restricted confidential. That allows us to keep that private, very secure information around like needle coke, for example, in a secure enclave so that not everybody else has access to it. And then again, because we have these different resource groups, and then you've got Synapse, you've got everything else from an Azure Data Explorer perspective, you can now create your pipelines for co-location of data, you've got your real-time use cases that you can execute on, et cetera. And so lastly, from an automation perspective, now that you have all of your data into a singular location, reporting, dashboarding, regulatory compliance, sustainability, reporting to the EPA, which is a real thing, SEC coming up soon, right, for all of your sustainability metrics, financial reports, dashboarding to various levels of leadership, improved visibility, right? We think that we know some of the KPIs that we want to focus and measure on, but with more data, you start to understand, hey, maybe I'm looking at this wrong. Providing more insights into our assets, driving improved mechanical integrity, machine learning and automation, advanced models for process optimization, automating once manual process like data gathering, calculations, et cetera, again, driving for sustainability, now becomes automated. Eventually, autonomous intelligent supply chains, simulation AI-driven what-if scenario planning for climate risk analysis, helping to reduce the ever-growing demand for greenhouse gas emissions, Scope 1, Scope 2, not just the reporting side of things, but actionable insights that can help you meet your goals. And so for us, Uptake Fusion is a critical piece to helping solve complex business challenges, both now and in the future. It's the convergence of OT and IT data that shortens the runway to value realization. So that's it for me.
So my title is To the Moon, a startup mindset for deploying self-service analytics across the enterprise. And for those who don't know, To the Moon is a reference to adoption. I had explained this to our legal counsel to get this released. Okay, so hi, I'm Mike. I'm wearing the only shirt that I own. So this is the second time I've done this for this talk. I lead a team of data scientists and data analysts in the Westlake digital office. We also have a digital applications group, a digital operations lead who's here with us, and we're led by the Chief Digital Officer, Konstantin Kalisios. So you can see we're not a very big group. So we're about 12 to 15 folks in our team. So let me give you a little bit of who Westlake is. So we might be new to a lot of you, and we've changed over time. This is a pretty busy diagram, and it's intended to be because we're a very integrated company. So we have lots of manufacturing, both on the chemical side all the way through to discrete, and we do batch in the middle. So there's a lot of integrations that are happening. We have over 15,000 employees, so we're a fairly large company in terms of people. And we have over 100 facilities across the US and global. So a brief history of where Westlake started and where we are today. In 1986 was actually our first facility in the Gulf Coast. And then over time, we've acquired and grew through expansions quite rapidly in the last 5 years, especially, to now being quite a large company. And the digital office you can see that I'm a part of has just been added at the tail end. So we are very new to the organization. In terms of growth, over the past 10 years, we've gone from around 700 million per year in EBITDA to closer to 4 billion. I don't think we've announced our 2022 quite yet, but around that range. So we've grown quite a lot in terms of the size of our company's profits. And I do want to point out in green, these are all of our acquisitions. So we have a lot of facilities that were bought by us over the years, and some of these are even acquisitions. So there's companies in companies. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of an overview of what we're tasked to do in the digital office. Hope you like Venn diagrams. I got a couple of them. You can see in the middle of this one, it's all about the data, and 3 core areas that need to come together. So at the top, always at the top, is business. This also is our manufacturing organization, which is like a business. On the right-hand side is the IT organization. So at Westlake, the digital group is not in IT. So we are a separate organization from IT. And then there's us. So we're on this side doing the evolution, but working on the foundation with IT. So we are supporting IT in that way. And one thing that's really important to us is that everything we do, everything we prioritize is based on benefits. So we don't have a task to just digitize everything at Westlake. We have a task to improve the company and measure those benefits. So we identified for measurable benefits 10 main initiatives, and this isn't only manufacturing, this also includes customer experience and supply chain logistics, so quite a tall task for us. And one of those 10 is a really important one because of the size of our group, is self-service analytics, because we can't be everywhere all at once. We have 15,000 employees. We have lots of data scientists embedded in them, and we want to make ourselves multipliers, and we want to get these great tools in their hands. Okay, so we have this digital evolution. How do we get things done being so small? Well, we really believe in the startup mindset. We want to have this ability to be very agile, just like a startup. And to do this, what's really important, we talked about this a bunch, is around obsessing over customers. This is about the end user. The user experience dominates. And that's what we really try to preach in our group. And also using an agile mindset. So being able to be very iterative. We experiment, we get feedback, we always bring the end customer into the conversation. So with every sprint, it ends with a review. You review with the customer, you find some feedback, you make adjustments, then you go off to do the next sprint. And finally, and this one's, for our group's really a lot of fun, is that we do whatever it takes to get the job done. So we wear lots of different hats, and we're happy to pick up whatever kind of tool we need to get the job done. Okay, so let's talk about our self-service analytics deployment and what we started with. So the situation we had was a successful deployment of a self-service analytics tool at one of our plants across those 100 plants at one of them. And it was a really interesting use case where they had data coming from the OT world that came into the IT network. So this is your typical historian data. But they were able to do something with it that previously you didn't see a lot of examples at Westlake, and this is about contextualizing it. So taking that information that if you're doing it in Excel or some sort of traditional tool, can be really problematic, and it's really hard to be able to do it, and definitely not to do it at scale. They shared this success with the broader community within Westlake and really demonstrated a value case that other groups really got interested about. And they thought, hey, there's something here that we could take and do at our site. And what came out of this was a great opportunity for a pilot. And I think really shows what a good successful pilot looks like. Taking a pilot user across multiple sites, they really got excited about it and said, you know what, I think there's something here. And so we brought that opportunity to a larger organization. So in this case, we brought it to the executives. And they said, okay, you're now challenged with getting this thing rolled out to the rest of the sites. So think about how do we do this in a small digital team to get this tool out to this very large community. So that was our challenge. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the solution. So this is a tool called Seek. So they're here today. And what we really like about it is the ability to meet the data where it is. In this case, a lot of this is at the sites. These are on-prem historians. We need to make connections to them. They have different, different styles. We don't have a lot of consistency at Westlake, so it's really important that the ability to abstract those differences. And so when you're using the platform, you don't know what type of historian or what type of data source you're actually connecting to. It all connects and looks the same. It's an analytics tool, so it's about analysis. We really like the ability for us to contextualize these time series signals. That's a main challenge with trying to extract information in the manufacturing space. And people spend lots and lots of time within Excel trying to do things that Excel is not meant to do. But this solution is intended for that time series data. And if you're a data scientist, like you are on my team, you're really excited about how it integrates with the Python world and makes it super easy for you to talk with the domain experts, sharing analysis, getting iterative, and updating your models. And then finally, the operational capabilities. So this is really about people making decisions with this information and the ability to go from development, you make a model, you show it to an end user, they have feedback, you update it, you ultimately say it's ready, it deploys in a click of a button. So the ability for us to scale with that kind of solution. Okay, so to really get this going, we have to handle a couple of things. One thing we have to deal with is how we actually treat each of these sites. And so you may have heard of this traditional model called hub and spoke, where you have a central organization that has some capabilities, and they try to disseminate that out to these individual spokes. So some characteristics of a hub and spoke model is that you expect some consistency so that the way that you're going to deploy something is very similar across each of these organizations. You also expect it to be unidirectional, so where the hub is directing outward towards the spokes. And then also you expect some maturity to be consistent. So where they are in their analytics journey has to be very similar to take this kind of analytics. But the reality at Westlake is that nothing is consistent. So we are a company that's made up of lots of other companies. In a lot of cases, we have work processes that are unique and systems that are unique to those individual spokes. So, the reality is these spokes have very different organizational makeups. They also are the experts at their space, and so they need to be pushing that expertise back to the hubs and then ultimately into the other spokes. And also they have various analytics maturity levels. So some people are doing very advanced things and we just need to enable them. Others need to be shepherded along, and they need to really start from the ground up, and we need to accommodate for that. So we're not building spokes. No one likes to be a spoke. Are there any spokes in the audience? Anyone proud to be a spoke? No, no one wants to be a spoke. We're trying to build franchises. So franchises is what it's all about. And let me describe what a franchise is. So a franchise has a little more variation. So you have variability between one or the other. A franchise also has best practices that the franchise brings back to the broader organization. And finally, a franchise has a bottom incremental kind of growth. And that's really important for us, that it comes from the bottom. Oh, it looks like Drake doesn't like that name. There we go. We're from Texas. so in case you didn't know. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we go from pilot to production? I know it was mentioned a couple of times earlier about, the pilot purgatory, getting stuck in this pilot phase and never getting out of it. So the way we did it was start very small, but we think very big. And then finally, you move very fast. So in the start small phase, this is the pilot, and something that I feel like really sets you up for success or failure, is really try to think about how to make this bigger than any very small group. And to do that, you want to have multiple franchises involved in that pilot so that there's no one group that's controlling it. And you also want to make sure the pilot is driven by a business stakeholder, and this was critical in our case, that it wasn't being driven by people that just love cool new toys. This was driven by somebody that had a business objective. And then finally, early adopters only. Early adopters only, people that want to do this, because when you're trying something out new, it's inevitably going to be hard at first. All right, in the next phase, this is around procurement and thinking big. This took quite a while for us, so I wish you all the best if you get through your procurement organization faster than we do. One thing that we really consider the success of this is getting that business stakeholder buy-in yet again to think about something large in terms of a deployment and to think about an enterprise deployment. And this is where you have to think strategically and say, this is worth an investment. And we see this as a multi-year opportunity that's going to take a little bit of time to roll out. And in that conversation, making sure the end users, the franchise owners, are the ones that are pulling for this. And this isn't coming from this new guy from digital office that loves the cool new toy. So once you've gotten through that procurement phase, now it's time to move. And so this is the time where you start deploying the solution out to the franchises. And to do this, the agile mindset is really critical. Focusing on the customer's needs and measuring your success throughout the process. And what's really important too is the right skills and passion in a deployment team themselves. So they're going to get up and work extra hard to get it done. So what do you need in this deployment team? So right on the top, domain understanding. So someone that can truly empathize with the end users. So someone who's been in their shoes. This is an analytics tool. So having analytics skills is extremely important. You got to be able to understand how to use this tool. And then finally, technical skills. So I'm really referring to the IT components to a solution like a self-service tool. This way, you can understand if there are any issues, how to correct them. And fortunately for us, we have Greg. So this is Greg Parkinson from our team. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to come today, so this is the part where he usually steps in. But Greg was an engineer who became a data analyst, has all these skills, and has been driving our Seek deployment. So, what's really important, what we learned throughout this process was around partnerships. Because it's not just the digital office that's going to get this done. This is really about a team. And at the top of that partnership is a franchise owner. So this is the person who has that business objective, who's going to be able to write a check if we need to, and who's going to be able to be driving this for their business or their site. We also need a deployment lead. So this is someone who is boots on the ground, embedded inside of that franchise. When Mike or Greg from corporate sends an email and says, hey, this is a great tool, go check it out, they're going to delete it. They're not interested in what we have to say. But a deployment lead carries a lot of weight, and they can get the job done and get people excited. And then also power users. So we have to identify some folks that are going to be the ones that are going to pick it up and run with it, and be the ones that are going to be evangelizing the capabilities of these tools once they get in their hands, and also prove the value. And then finally, you need to have an IT historian guru. Inevitably, things are going to come up, especially in a company like Westlake that has lots of variability, and having someone who can just do it, without going through a lot of hoops, and get the plants connected and data running through the system. And then I'd also want to call it the vendor team. So having the people that are the true experts of the product with you along the way, getting them involved as much as possible has been very beneficial. Okay, so a couple of tips that I'd recommend if any of you are going through this journey is one, starting with low-hanging fruit. I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, but maybe it's not all the time. So go where there's going to be success with a high likelihood of success. And this is where plants already have a maturity level of analytics, so they have people that can pick up these tools and run with them, and also people that obviously are naturally curious that want to try new technologies. Another thing that's really important, and we really emphasize this throughout our deployment, is to make it easy. You don't want to add extra hoops to jump through to get someone trained, to get someone accessed, to get someone data, to get some sort of advanced analysis that we could provide from my team. So we constantly make these steps as easy as possible. And then finally, building a community of practice. So what's great about an enterprise self-service tool is that we can build on a common platform analyses and share those with one another. We have similar problems across these sites, even if they're making different things. And being able to share with one another and go to each other when you need help has been really beneficial. And we're really focusing on that now in our stage of the deployment. Okay, so where are we today? So we're about 9 months into this journey. So we're still in a very early stage. And what we're doing is tracking our progress and really focusing on where we need to go next. So far, we have 165 folks on the platform, and this is across 9 different sites. So we have 9 deployments, and we have many more coming the rest of this year. And what's really exciting is that we're starting to see growth in using the platform. So it's not just the number of people on it, but how much they're doing on it that's really starting to show an increase. So what we saw in the fourth quarter of last year is this basically the same number of people are doing more within that platform. And we want to see this trajectory going to the moon, like we said at the beginning. And with that, I'll be finished. Thank you.
I'm Espen Grimstad. I am a platform or subsurface data platform manager as of last 1st of February, so things change. We live in an agile world. I used to be in technology and digitalization. Now I'm in sales and services, so we're taking a project from being a project to being a product and following the product ownership and actually putting a product owner to it. I want to talk today not about my project, but another one that we're doing, and particularly on maturing governance and succeeding with the adoption of data operations for us. I suspect not all of you know what or who PGS is, so I need to have a little introduction of that. So I'll do that, and then I'll talk about our digital transformation journey so far, and approaches we have done to manage the governance and succeed with the ever important user adoption. So PGS, we are a Oslo headquartered company. We turned 30 years last year, so we're not a young pup anymore in this regard. We're about just shy of 1,000 employees on a global basis, headquarters in Oslo. We also have offices in Houston and in the UK and some other few locations, smaller offices. We are a seismic acquisition and imaging company, fully integrated. It means we have the vessels, we acquire the data, we process the data, and we sell the data. So, but we also generate data for ourselves, but mostly our business is to sell the data that we acquire. We basically have 2 main business models when selling the data. There's either contract data or multi-client data. Now, contract data is when Total, Equinor, Shell, BP, all these guys, they come to you and say, we want you to explore what's happening on the seabed in this area here, and we want to purchase that data. So we go out and do that. We give them the data afterwards, and that's the last we see of that data. That data is theirs, and they can do whatever they like with it. They get the raw files, they get the final products and everything. Then we have what we call multi-client data. That's data that we can license. We acquire it on our cost sometimes. Sometimes it's also pre-funded, the surveys. But we acquire the data, and then we license it out to customers, the same type of customers, right? That means we take a portion of the data and sell it to Total, a second portion of the data and sell it to Equinor, and so on and so forth. So, but we own the rights to the data, but we license it out for normally for perpetuity. But I won't talk so much more about that, but with the digitalization journey is now allowing us to generate and create new business models around licensing this data. But that's another talk next time, perhaps. We're four business areas, sales and services, where I'm right now. So again, the multi-client and contract, and that's where imaging is located as well. Those are the ones processing the data we acquire out in the vessels. We have operations that are effectively operating the vessels and all the assets that we have. And currently we're having 6 3D vessels. The 3D vessels means they're more equipment and more streamers that put in the water that can create then eventually a 3D image of the subsurface when they're done. The other alternative is a 2D, where you only get a small profile over a certain area. Normally, a company like an energy company will do a 2D survey before they come in and do a 3D survey. So there's different types of data. Then we have technology and digitalization. And under there is R&D, enterprise IT, and a small digitalization portfolio. We have kept it under the technology and digitalization is a relatively new group. We recognize that digitalization efforts and EIT is an important part of who we are. We are a technology company, so that needs to be recognized in the business areas. Lastly, we also have new energy. Like it or not, we all enjoy our standards of living. We need to have energy going forward. Renewables cannot replace this in the very near term, so there still is a room for oil and gas out there. But we need to also be sustainable and contribute to the energy transition, so we are focusing more and more on providing data to the new energy domain, be it wind, be it CCSU, and even seabed mining, if you like. They all need our type of data that we acquire, so we just need to tweak our data on how we collect it, and then it will be a commodity for them. Yeah, some numbers. We're sort of just north of 800 million in revenues. Everybody who's heard about oil and gas is extremely cyclical. If it goes well for Equinor and Exxon and these guys, we're usually trailing behind, and if oil price drops, then we are the first ones they drop as well, so then we notice that right away. Revenues for 2021 was not this much, I'll tell you that. And market capital also is adjusting thereafter. So it's a little bit important to stay a little bit on this. So this is one of our vessels, one of the newer ones. They're kind of purpose-built for what we do. They give us a platform to deploy and recover the gear. And the spread that we are deploying in the water is quite sizable. The vessels are very oddly shaped for making them very quietly running through the water. So it's optimization for the acquisition of the data. So what we do, we tow these streamers with hydrophones and geophones in the water. The spread, as we call it, the multiple of streamers can be quite large. If you were to sort of take that and the spread and the footprint of the spread, it would cover about twice the size of Hyde Park, right? Quite large areas. So about 10 kilometers long and about 1.5 to 2 kilometers wide. That's quite a large moving object. And that also means that quite a lot of data is generated every day. And these vessels, we try at least as much as we can to be 24/7. So the actual data that we sell is, I call it the squiggly lines. I'm not a geophysicist, but I call it the squiggly lines. There's the black and white data you see there. That's the data we acquire and sell. But on the streamers, on the yellow you see here, there's a lot of instruments that register data. The vessel has all its engines and all that stuff also connected, so it's generating a lot of data. So again, there's two types of data, the seismic data and the user-generated data. We'll focus on the user-generated data today and how we're sort of trying to solve problems for ourselves with that. But I want to mention the three main digital initiatives in PGS. It's Digital Factory, which I'm going to talk about today, which is mostly looking at the user-generated data or financial data or other types of internal data, not seismic, to develop use cases and develop new products that can use internally to improve our efficiency or cut cost. Then we have the project I'm actually heading up, or product as it is now, is the multi-client data on demand. We're putting all our seismic data in the cloud. We're using Cognite Data Fusion to contextualize that data together with all the metadata of that. And we use the open and public documented APIs to connect clients, and they can stream the data straight from our data lake, so subsurface data lake, into their site. And this is large amounts of data. I mean, that's just the deliverable set in the multi-client set is a couple of petabytes of data. And that's all sitting in the cloud. We're now moving into a rawer stage of data, and then we talk about maybe 10 petabytes of data, and then you can go to field data, and then, I don't know, it's sitting on tapes, it's sitting on site in silos, on tapes, and storage, everywhere else, right? So it's a lot of data. Lastly, it's PGS EOS, which is a imaging in the cloud. So we've taken the 80% of the imaging, the processing of the seismic data, and converted them to cloud-native functions, basically, using Google Cloud. That's quite compute-intensive work. Up until a few years ago, we had the biggest, or one of the top, I can't remember, 5 or 10 on-prem computers. It's called Cray. That was decommissioned last year, on time and on budget, I was going to say, and 80% of that compute power was put in the cloud. It's enough compute power to get mentioned in Google Talks around the world, and we peaked at, I think it was 2.8 million virtual CPUs during one of these runs. Again, not going to be able to talk too much more about that, unfortunately, but it's a large scale. So both Digital Factory and Solis are using contextualizing data using Cognite's CDF for that. Two different flavors of CDF, but still backbone is CDF. So our digital transformation journey so far started a couple of years back. Start small, right? One guy, 50%. My former boss was sort of saying, can you go off and sort of just manage the little project, a couple of use cases for one vessel. That lasted 6 months, and they realized this is extremely scalable. Obviously just scaling it to the vessels, but on the number of use cases, so he was permanently transferred into this project, and the little group called the Digitalization Group was formed. We signed agreements with Google and Cognite, and that's more than finding a technology provider. That's finding a partner in doing this journey with you. You can pick technology, you can pick platforms, but you don't find a partner that can do the journey with you, that can help you on the transformation that comes with this, you're not getting the full value. But that we did. So that was kickstarted back in 2019. We started educating ourselves and the organization on agile working. And in 2020, we sort of solidified this and established these 3 projects. Digital Factory, with the 3 use cases. Solis started up, and EOS had the first production run. Now EOS, all the compute on the cloud, that's all done in-house. The Digital Factory and the Solis, we were contracting out some of the development work and the ingestion pipeline work to companies that we work closely with to do this. And literally the journey is just sort of, the list gets a bit longer, so it's actually just scaling up as we're going out. We're not done, even though this chart stops at last year. We will continue, and it will grow even more. As I said, EOS will move all this compute power into the cloud. We will move to having more data in the cloud in terms of seismic, and we'll create more use cases for the Digital Factory. Oops. Yeah, so Digital Factory. Getting the purpose of the project extremely important. I think it was mentioned in all these talks I've heard about today, and somebody, my thunder has been stolen several times here, I think. But that won't be a revelation for you then. So, but we're working agile, right? Has been important. So start small, do the iterations, present the results, involve the stakeholders, and grow the project after that. Extremely important to have cross-functional teams, both internally in PGS, between the business areas to grow the business and to create the business buy-in, but also cross-functionally, so with partners like Cognite and Google and other contractors that can help us out on this. Yeah, finding the right technology and learning new ways of working is part of the journey here. So right now the digital factory they started off with 3 use cases. It's now 10 use cases in sustaining, and there's still 5 they're working on, and there's a big hopper or a large hopper of other use cases that we can implement. Just a little bit, I have no idea if this is a large amounts in anybody's regards, but I'm thinking in just 2.5 to 3 years' time, we collected quite a few. And this is only the user-generated data, so nothing about the seismic. This is all about the instrument sitting on the streamers, or the vessel, the speed, or the engine propulsion, or fuel consumption, all that stuff. Obviously, if we bring out more vessels, because we have more vessels, some of them are stacked now, but we can bring out more vessels if the capacity is needed, and then this just scales up. But you can't do the scaling unless you have a good platform to start the scaling on in terms of number of data. You can just feed it up. But defining the use cases, I mean, this is a learning on our side, right? We thought a little bit sort of, we will try this out, and someone would just sit down and start, making it work. But defining the use cases and trying to answer these four simple questions here on the left. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And we are technical people, so we immediately went down to I want it to look like this, I want it to do that, rather than actually spending time in defining and articulating the problem you're trying to solve. It's taken a long time. You're talking with people in operations, they go straight to, you want to do this, we want to do that. No. Define what problem you're trying to solve, get that down on paper, talk it with your colleagues in your own business area, and then we can define the use case for it, and we'll take it to a portfolio board, which is consisting of people from all over the organization. Even the CFO sits in that portfolio board, and they review the use cases. They're coming in and say, thumbs up or thumbs down, right? Extremely important. You can start on this, and we've done all these mistakes several times, but coming back to actually defining that, and answering these 4 simple questions. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What business value will it bring? What does success look like? And how does it link to our strategy? So if you can do that, and you actually make the use case owner sit in the business line, engaging internally, getting the buy-in from there, then you're much better set up for success. Once you started that, there's a journey, right? And it's a journey about communication. So you need to be transparent about it. You need to communicate the use case, the information about it, the value it's going to bring, over and over and over and over again. You cannot talk enough about it, but you have to talk about it in different ways. Means, putting up a site on your online portal. You do demos in public, in a sense. You have the CEO talk about it in the town halls. You write articles, you invite people to Teams meetings. Be transparent and open about it. This is not your little secret, that project that you're working on. You need to be telling people about it. Extremely important, that we found. So I put up 7 times there. I think that's absolute minimum. 7 times, 7 different ways in different communications about the use case. Then things are starting to stick. But only that. Are we succeeding? I think we are. One use case was optimizing the vessel speed. The crew on the vessels change out every 5 and 6 weeks. Full set of new crew. They come with their little quirks. You know, I know my boat, I know the crew, I'll do it this way, right? They know the client, or they may not know the client, they know the different contracts and stuff. They all had a different way. So you see there's variability, and keeping the speed on the vessels, for instance, at the level pace or an optimal speed in terms of fuel consumption, what kind of contract you're on, and all these stuff, was very difficult. So we saw there was a use case here for actually optimizing the speed. So the crew out there who's sort of seeing the controlling the vessel, they sort of have to find, there's so many parameters to relate to. They couldn't decipher it all, so they needed some kind of visibility, some kind of dashboard. So there's two dashboards here shown. I think they're both using some kind of no code or even low code or from Cognite. The top one is an overview of all the vessels as they're in production, and this we'll be showing around in the PGS offices. Anybody can go in there, so you're very transparent on what the speed is, what the vessels are doing. The lower one is sort of a speed dashboard that the guys on the vessels use themselves. So they can actually look at it, and becomes very transparent whether what's your limitation for going a little bit faster, because the faster we go, usually we get to the next project quicker, and it's a higher turnaround. So you want to keep that speed. I mean, you're thinking about a vessel that going 24/7. If you increase the speed from 4.2 to 4.5 knots, doesn't seem a whole lot, and it's not very fast. But over time, that's a lot of money. And by the way, if you remember the spread of the vessel, of the equipment, makes it a very long time to turn the vessels around. So we're spending sometimes in some projects more time turning the vessel around, 2 or 3 hours, just turning the vessel around to get to the next line. You want to keep that speed up. You want to be sure that the guy who's controlling the speed has all the information, the right information to optimize the speed. ROI has been mentioned. A 5% speed increase, I think, is respectable in this regard. More consistent, or perhaps more important, that having consistent and predictable speed leads to fuel efficiency and, on the ESG perspective, less emissions and obviously less cost for us. So win-win. The other one is HSE Q categorizer. Now, all the crews on the vessels have KPIs on registering if they see something safe and unsafe. This, when I was offshore, I did 10 years offshore in my early days in PGS. This was all on paper. It was a little carton based on the DuPont system. You wrote down if you saw the person not wearing a life jacket or not helmet or something like that. You wrote it down, a few little tick boxes and a little free text, right? That's all good, right? Localized on the vessel, they have control of that, they register how many cards and all that stuff. And even if you do it digitally, right, register all this, you can see trends locally on the vessel if the pirate chief has the time and effort to do it. So if we can take that information, especially the free text information, and put some AI on that, collected all the data, put some AI on and see if there's trends there. See if there's anything that stands out. And as it turned out, there was a high degree of cards mentioning a personal location beacon, personal locator beacon, that's mounted in the life jackets of the crew when they're working on the deck. That means if the crew should fall overboard, God forbid, it's much easier to find them if these locator beacons are functioning. We actually saw there was a trend of cards identifying these beacons wrongfully mounted or not working at all, but in isolation on one vessel that wasn't really visible. When you aggregated over all the vessels, it became as a pattern. So we told and informed the manufacturer of the beacon and the life jackets about this malfunction, and they fixed the equipment and made themselves a better product and made ourselves better and made better safety for the crew. And nothing beats some external validation, and this use case actually won I think it's a European sort of thing, Verdantix Innovation Excellence Awards in last year. And the data generated and sort of AI is all sort of showing just a Power BI dashboard here, very simple, but it really brings out the information in the data. All right. Well, last slide, just summarizing. Identify and articulate the problem, extremely important. Ensure collaboration across the company and the business. The business value then comes from the scalability. If you have a good platform, a good starting point, then you can scale it. You know, there's all this other data coming in all the time, but you need to be able to scale it out to the vessels and internally in the business. So, thank you very much.
And the panelists that are just joining us now, what I'd like to do is have them introduce themselves and just give a little bit of introduction of either what they do and some things that maybe you can get an idea of some questions to ask them. So do you want to start with you, Karan? Okay.
Sure.
Allison.
I'm Allison Buneman. I'm the industry principal for the chemicals industry at Seek. I have the pleasure of working with Mike at Westlake and all of our other customers in the chemicals space, helping them understand ways to unlock business value with their data.
Karen?
I'm Kieran Mida. I'm with Cognite, and echoing Allison here, I have the pleasure of working with Espen in Norway. We're based out of Oslo, Norway, headquartered there, but working globally with our customers. And again, we had a few customers actually here at the event, so it's been a really great event. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you. And Ajay?
Yes. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ajay Madhvesh. I'm the chief or the head of commercial operations for Uptake. Here, supporting Chris in the journey at Phillips 66. So, like many of the other panelists here, we have many customers who came with us. So, want to recognize all of them too through this panel session. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is ask the audience for questions. There should be someone walking around with a mic. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions you're thinking about them. But so I guess one of the things that I was thinking about is, I guess we can start with this, is if you had to do over the project, if you had a do-over, is there anything that you do differently, or would you do it all the same? No laughing. So does anyone want to answer that?
I mean, we nailed it, so.
So Michael? Yes.
No, perfect.
Perfect, okay.
Actually, I can't take credit for the success of our rollout. It was really, we were set up for success. So I do have to give a shout out to Doug Niddick, if you ever watches this, but he was a he was a super user that was in a high level role, and just having his support and saying we can do this was so critical, because he had a foundation across all of the different franchises we're building, and so just gonna give him a shout out. But that's just a very successful way to do these pilots to large scale deployments, is having that right stakeholder from the beginning supporting.
Okay. Yes, we have a question in front here. Sylvester. Oh, yeah, get the mic. Yeah, we need to be on the mic, because otherwise the video that they're recording, you won't be able to hear it later.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentations. All great presentations. I was just wondering, I guess that's a question for you, Espen. How do you get the data off the vessel? And you mentioned it's multiple petabytes even, or terabytes, I'm not so sure, but in any case, how do you get the data off?
Yeah, okay, so so there's two types of data, right? So the seismic data for the time being is still being sent on tapes, on disks and stuff like that. That's still too large to transmit. We are looking in ways of doing that, because we can imagine a full sort of cloud run digital flow of delivering the data. Technology is getting there with Starlink and these guys, but it's not quite there yet for our purposes. But we are going to test this, right? But the other end of that is the acceptance and the taking delivery on the client side. We're ahead of the game here, right? We're more prepared to them than they are really to accept all this data. But that's coming. They're all talking about it, but they just need to sort of push them in the right direction. The user-generated data, that's streamed off the vessels. So that's relatively, in terms of sort of volume, not that much. Right? And we did have some data from before as well that we had sort of coming in on the more traditional ways, yeah. But it's satellite communication, yeah.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Oh, over there. This one.
So I heard a lot of you talk to agile delivery strategy. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how you define your products, specifically so that you can deploy delivery teams toward those products.
Does anybody want to take
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
Michael?
The example that I gave. I mean,
You can
this-
grab the mic and
Okay,
pull it
sure.
out if you want.
In my case, it was more or less that, we just need to get this deployed. So we weren't necessarily designing the product. I mean, it was really about designing the goal, I think was the focus. So with each of our iterations, what's the goal in 2 weeks? I mean, we had a long-term goal, but we defined very short-term goals. So the goal was really the focus and knowing what success looked like, each of those goals, because we set it up so where we didn't know in the next 2 weeks what our goal was going to be. So it was really just making sure every 2 weeks we had a good process for goal definition.
I think just keeping the end users close to the project, keeping them in the loop on the demos and on the processes there. That's extremely key to getting the adoption on the outside. These are very, for our on that part on the digital factory, relatively small, and some of them are relatively. The product isn't it's not a huge one like you guys are working on, sort of data like that. So the implementation is relatively small, right? And the deployment is small. But even more important that you actually have the end user really using it and getting and taking advantage of it. I mean, that's the owner of it, right? They need to be accountable for the money spent on actually developing it. So.
Perfect.
I can add to that a little bit with what Espen's saying. I think he talked about it a little bit earlier, which is really being able to start small, identify those use cases, and then those use cases can eventually become those data products. And then that once it's deployed, it's scaled, and that scalability also winds up building that high-value library of use cases, which then in Espen's case, in PGS's case, has actually been productized a bit.
Okay, do we have any more questions? No, I have some. Michael, how much resistance did you face when you were proposing this cloud architecture, and what advantages did you see as a SaaS user regarding the self-service software?
Yeah, so doing a cloud deployment in SaaS, it was very new to Westlake. And I'll give a lot of credit to the IT organization who didn't just say the answer is no and that's it. They wanted to hear us out and hear what the options are. Because we are so benefits and ROI-driven company, we said, well, I mean, if there's a deal here, let's hear it, And so they were open-minded to doing this and understanding what the risk was, in terms of data security, but what the reward was in no infrastructure to manage and very light administration requirements. They agreed and said, yeah, I think this will work. And I don't think anyone regrets that decision. I think we see it as a success, so far. And I think it just opens the door to say, okay, we understand how this works. We recognize that it's a good way to go forward, and we'll likely do more of it.
Okay.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
Not
That would be great.
Not resistance, but I was just education of management, if you like, because moving to the cloud is not a lift and shift operation, right? You need to do more of it. I mean, just putting in a cloud, that's not enough. You need to actually utilize the cloud functions. I mean, just having a virtual machine out there to run the software and run the process is not enough. So you're actually utilizing the cloud functions to do that. And it's an educational process for both internally, but especially management, right? Understanding what this is, right? And what the benefit is, the scalability. Sorry.
I think there's also a financial shift too, right? Going from your CapEx to OpEx from a cloud perspective. And it's that mindset that you have to have in mind as you're developing all of this. It's not just, hey, there's CapEx that you're spending initially. It's thinking of the long game and setting yourself up from a financial perspective to have enough OpEx to support the cloud-based or SaaS-based solutions as well.
Can I add a follow-up question for the audience? Can I get a hand raised if you use at least one SaaS-based application in your role?
Really great.
That's pretty good.
So I'm going to ask a question, kind of building on what you just asked, Janice. So as opposed to resistance, can you speak to perhaps instances where people wanted you to move faster than you were ready to, where it could be an instance of a super user who's maybe a super uber excited user, or some stakeholder who's, you know, sees lots of opportunity and they're saying, hey, you know what, we're going to win the next quarter with with this new tool. So just speaking to how to manage expectations or kind of shape and move things along in a more steady path. Just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, right? Because anytime any sponsor of any kind throws money out there, they want to see returns quickly. Mergers, acquisitions, whatever it may be, they're wanting to see that return quickly. And so, again, to what Espen was talking about earlier, having those stakeholders engage from the very beginning so that they're part of not only the design, but the entirety of everything. There's an ownership there. And there's also clarity into, okay, I realize that this isn't going to be a very quick sprint, right? It is a journey. It is a marathon. Again, depending on the use case, if you've got low-hanging fruit use cases, right, you can see some of those pieces come online pretty quick and start to see some sort of return. But if it's larger in nature, obviously it's going to take longer. And so having folks engaged up front along the entire value chain of what it is that you're trying to build, I think is a key component to making sure that people don't have unrealistic expectations.
Ajay, you want to add to that?
I want to generalize what Chris said in a bit more kind of broader perspective that we are seeing, that people who are truly committed to transformation see that big picture, right? So the short-term returns are important, short-term wins are important, but they also realize that the part at the end of the rainbow with gold is out there. So I think, people like Chris, I'm going to use him as an example, they actually walk these value propositions across different business units to bring that value, expose that value. And I think that's how big shifts are being made. And that's what we see in the market today.
Anybody else want to comment? Well, I have another question. 'Cause it was a discussion actually we had at lunchtime today, and it was like, do you look for the problems first and then try to figure out what technology would help solve that problem, or do you just put the technology in place and let it find the problems, like analytics and things like that? So it would be interesting to hear your approaches.
Say the same thing.
I mean, I'll go first. Yeah, if you build it, they will come. No. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely problem first. I think one thing Westlake does well is allows people to go and find a local optimum. And this was a case where one group did one thing and they really liked it. They liked it so much they wanted to tell people about it. And all we did was listen and say, okay, I think this has much bigger spread. How do we just get in more people's hands, knowing that it's already been proven, and let them explain why it's proven, not me. So it's just giving people a platform and then just mapping out a path to be able to do it. But absolutely problem first, whenever possible. If you're lucky, problems come to you. A lot of times you're going to have to dick around for them. So.
Yeah. Same. So for us, I mean, our PMO office or project management office, you can't even ask for money unless there is some sort of value prop or statement to it. Now, in every solution or every situation, there's not always a value prop there. Sometimes it's, hey, we've got to have this in order to manage obsolescence, right? But in most of these types of digital use cases, you better be solving a problem, because at the end of the day, IT or whatever it is, that's not what's making the company money. We're there to serve the customer. And in this case, it's oil and gas, it's whatever else, right?
Espen, did you want to?
No. Echo all that.
I think from the software side, hear me?
Yeah.
From the software side, for the technology services provider side, we at Cognite also see that, the customer does tend to start with a problem. Otherwise, you wouldn't really know where to start. So it's important to identify the problem first. And in our case, with the PGS, for example, it's starting with those 3 to 4 use cases first, and then iterating on top of them, scaling them like we talked about earlier. Scalability will only come if you have a test bed.
So another question I have is, and it has to do with the data operations platforms. And as they mature, there's this, and the technology, there's sort of a responsibility shift between the business and IT in their traditional roles. And I was wondering if you guys could comment on that. How you seeing that shift with the roles with IT and the business?
I thought Mike's little org chart that he presented was really interesting, given that his digital office is something that's separate from IT, but kind of adjacent to both IT and the business. I think that's a really nice and interesting way to think about digital as not only being part of IT, but being part of the broader company.
Yeah, I mean, I can add a little on that. I mean, it does start when we talk to businesses. The first thing we have to say is, hey, we're not IT. We're not IT. Because that's what they just think will fix their workstation. But the idea of having, a group that's kind of enabling, but the business it's their data. They're the ones who are creating it and using it. They're driving it. All three are required. And separating them, I think, has been very successful so far. IT at first wasn't sure what we were supposed to be doing, but now that we have a successful project, they understand, okay, when there's a use case that we need to understand how to actually implement, IT's not going to do that. They're going to make sure the data is available, but we implement. We're the ones that are shepherding the solutions, and it's a good partnership.
I want to think of it in the following way. So there was a time when IT was a cost function, meaning that it was they were not a for-profit organization. And I think the way some of the organizations have transformed themselves is by either augmenting that function, technology function, with a value proposition that comes out of it. So I think, there are various ways that different customers have done this. Some people have chief analytics officer, some people have chief data officer. So all of these people are ultimately trying to create a value proposition for their own organization, while also taking a responsibility for the maintenance of secure data within their organization. So I think that transformation, whichever way it takes, the Venn diagram was a fantastic depiction of one of the ways that the organizations are migrating themselves. The other thing that you'll see is a business-led the digital transformation office, which is a mix of people from technology functions, the CTO's office, and also the IT functions, all come together to drive that transformation. So ultimately, what's good about all of this is that the digitalization, as Espen said, is here. And it's, which was kind of the hardest thing for it to kind of emerge out of the existing organization. So I think that's a great thing, and that was the cool theme that I saw across the three presentations here.
Does anybody else want to add to that? Okay. I think we have a question here, Jane.
Okay, so I'm Jane Arnold. I have about 35 years of manufacturing experience, most of that in process and some of that in discrete. So this question, I believe, is for Michael concerning Westlake. And you described having both process, batch, or all three, and discrete. And in my past experience, there were similar problems especially with data, but the solutions were sometimes different, and I'm kind of wondering how you took that approach.
Yeah, so it is a challenge because of the variety of the manufacturing environments. It's what we say is salt comes out of one side and siding comes out the other, and we do everything in between to make that. So there's a lot of different problems to solve in between. We want to take a very holistic approach to one platform to do it all. That's not going to be possible. And a lot of this is due to just organizationally, a factory has 5 people, and one of these chemical plants has 4,000 people. They need different tools. And in some cases, they need solutions built for them that they basically don't have to touch. In other cases, you can go into self-service. So we don't have a one-size-fits-all, but in general, we have, as few as we can do it, that's what we do it. And it's, a handful. Hopefully that answered your question.
It does, thank you. I'm just curious of the approach. All the presentations were very good, very interesting, so thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? There's another one right beside him. It's good if you state your name too and the company.
Jim Graves with Indorama Ventures. So we talked about ROI and value a lot and use cases. Sometimes I feel like we get caught in a use case trap where that's all we do is use case, use case, use case, use case. But I think if we know the answer and we know where we need to go, that's really about vision and trying to get there. So, one thing I'm curious if you've tried to calculate or some way, take credit for is the value of people's time in your organizations, because I think what we're after here is two things. We're wanting to get to answers and new information, but we're also wanting to make it quicker for people so that they can be more valuable with their time, perhaps do more valuable things. So have you taken any kind of tactic to look at, what you're providing in terms of quality of people's lives and the value of their time?
We haven't done it, but we really, really wanted to, because that is one of the biggest and quickest benefits you get from this, right? I mean, but it's extremely difficult, right? I mean, it would be very subjective, right? So if I spend time on this and I can do this much better or faster, but actually seeing that the delivery of the data is quicker, right? It will release time on this person's hand, and then they can do other stuff. But it is kind of intangible. So no, we didn't embark on that, but your comment earlier on the use case, I have the same comment from he was supposed to be the sort of the product owner of deliberating the multi-client data, and he was also kind of fed up about this use case focus, but we managed to turn him, right? So now he's a favorite. So, because it is important, right? I mean, you need to split it down into these small compartments.
Okay, Allison? Yeah.
I would say there's nothing that gets our team more excited than when some engineer says, you saved like 8 hours of my week every week. And that then translates into the more tangible use case driven business ROI that comes from solving productivity, reliability, quality type challenges. But it's improving that person's productivity and making their job easier, and in some cases making their job fun. That's going to inspire some of those bigger picture high ROI use cases.
I have one, sorry, one tangible one. We mapped out the services of a third party to us to was doing part of the delivery of the data to the clients. Spreadsheet, naturally, right? So 80 lines in this spreadsheet. And then we mapped out what the process would look afterwards. We had done this, and we're down to 20 points, or 20 lines. So that's obviously less work and less interaction with us, between us and the third party as well as less sort of money spent on that third party. So just say one thing.
So I
Ajay?
can barely see you, but the use case is also a pretty poorly used word. Everyone defines use case the way they feel what a use case should be, which is also a problem. It goes back to your point about, anyone can call anything use case, and it's usually what we've seen is when someone says use case, it leads to a POC, which is, going back to the earlier question about, where's the value if you keep doing POCs, I think. So I think I take your comment in that way, because ultimately people are saying, I want to do more with less people, which is to the point that you're also referring to. And it's almost like, unmeasurable, because POCs never really give you those results, or the one use case never gives you that benefit at that point. So I think it is, in general, I think we should all rethink whenever we use the term use case, that we should be careful what it means.
Okay.
I think I was just going to add a little bit about the user's time, the end user's time. The idea of having a very good technology partner, and this is one of the threads I saw in the presentations also, is to have someone who can actually really help to make their lives easier. And if it's a really good data foundation, that is part of the tech stack, whether it's for business or for IT, the entire purpose of that part of your technology partner, that tech stack, really should be to make their lives easier. It should be faster to get at the data. It should be faster to scale that data, to build the use cases, for lack of a better word, or solve their problems, if you will. And then to be able to actually build, like I said earlier, to be able to build a library of high-value data products, if you will, that are then reusable by others in the organization.
Okay, we have about a few minutes left. I guess we have time for one more question.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Jumping in here at the end, and I'm trying to look around the corner too, but just to give you a perspective, it's Mark Brosso from Epcor Water. So as a utility, one of the things we were looking at as we go forward and look at some of these initiatives, and as some of them get bigger, I'm curious, like we're looking, do we need a separate governance structure to look at these kind of, advanced automation and looking at these kind of things? Is there a separate structure we need to be doing? Because if you're going to put these projects in, a utility, we've got aging infrastructure. So do I want my advanced automation projects to be competing with those? And it sounds like in some of the areas that, yeah, projects go through a sort of one process. Is there a separate process that's actually used for some of the things that are being done here, a separate governance structure? Or is it all sort of lumped together into just projects?
Does anybody want to come?
Can I ask
Ajay?
a question? By governance, do you mean data governance or just the governance at the organization level?
So at the organization level, what gets approved, like projects? You've got so much money in an organization to do projects, and I know, some you're looking at these smaller projects, and that's certainly some. But like you say, we're going to go out and put water meters on everybody's house, right, across the city of Edmonton, which is 1.5 million people. Significant investment that the utility is going to do, but it's going to be able to provide a bunch of information for us and a bunch of data and things that we need. But we're also competing with other things, and we're looking at saying, do we put these all through the same structure, or is there a different governance, a different evaluation of those kind of projects that you need to go through as opposed to other projects in the organization, or are they all lumped together?
So I can't speak to how every other organization is stood up, but I can speak to how ours is. And from us, it was a top-down approach. Our executives, our C-suite, our board of directors said, we need to fundamentally change the way that we do business. Not just to increase returns or things for shareholders, which is obviously, that is a key driver, but also to survive. And if you've got these initiatives competing with other initiatives, and they're both a high priority, which one gets done? And so by an entire C-suite being completely aligned with what the strategy is moving forward, it obviously trickles down to the various respective business units, leaders within each function, et cetera, and they have a full clarity as to what it is that they want to execute for that year. Some of them are transformative, some of them are keep the lights on. And you've got to balance the two, right? Because if you do, again, technology without keeping your OE high, you don't survive. So you do have to strike that balance. But having your executives and the respective sponsors for whatever project or initiatives that you're doing being completely aligned on what the prioritization is, that's key.
Okay, well, I think we're just about out of time, but what I'd like to do to close is ask each of our panelists and speakers to give the audience one takeaway from this session. So we can start with you, Ajay.
I think almost building on the last comment, the time has come when there's enough technology maturity that you should think about, all the people in the operational world should think about transformation, because I think, I can speak for myself. We've done a lot of POCs. We actually, they're great in their own way, and they should be done in certain cases. But I think if you're doing POCs for technology, like using them as spikes in sprints, then I think that time is over. I mean, because now you can realize value with a fair amount of certainty. And that's my input to everyone who's here, as to consider that as you move forward.
Kieran?
I would say that build MVPs. Think about your POCs as building, or even your first POC that you're building, think about it as an MVP and not necessarily just as a POC. Again, it's changing the jargon a bit. Or you're building digital twins with your software. So jargon is not what's saving or is not driving digital transformation. It is going to be digital twins that's driving your digital transformation. So the way that I think we think about it, Cognite, is really focus on your, whatever it is that you're trying, whatever problems you're trying to solve, focus on building that MVP that is then scalable across the organization, across the company.
Allison?
I would say people is kind of my central theme. People are the ones who feel the pain that technology attempts to solve and address. And so really empowering your people and making them, or making their lives easier, giving them time back is going to be a huge success factor.
Espen?
Yeah, a flavor of that. I mean, it's digital transformation is not all about the tools and the gadgets. It's about changing the organization, doing things new ways, adapting to ways of expected of clients, but doing things better and just change the way you do it. I mean, if you just keep going like you do, you make your profits, but you still you can improve on that if you change it.
Mike?
I was also going to say people, as you and Nelson, but I'd say passion. All of the people that were most passionate on this project made it not only fun, but it made it successful because they were the ones really, cheerleading this, not us. So that was really, really helpful.
That's good. People's a good one. If I'm going to go a different direction, I would say you're not alone. You are not crazy in these ideas that you all have. You're here for a reason. You came to listen to these speeches, these presentations for a reason. And oftentimes we all feel alone, but we are all on this journey together. We are all on this highway together. I was given this analogy earlier. It's a cross-country highway. We're getting on at different points of that highway, but we're all headed towards the same direction. And so know that you're not crazy. You've got lots of partners. You've got lots of other folks that you can reach out to. And yeah, you're not alone.
Okay, well, with that, I'd just like to thank all of our speakers and the panelists for joining us today and their companies for all their time. And we really did appreciate it. I thought they had excellent presentations. And I also wanted to mention that tonight's SeaWorld, so everybody knows, and everybody's invited. And so that's important. We got to get going for that. And if anybody's interested, if you weren't interested in some of the data for the data platforms, we have David Clayton's outside beside the ARC registration desk. So if you want to take a look, on the way out, you could take a quick look. And he has the actual data there. So anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. We had a great audience. So, and let's just have a round of applause for our speakers and panelists.